Okay, great. Well, I have two objectives this evening. One is to talk about ADSB, and the other is not to trip over all this hardware while I'm up here. So anyway, thanks for coming. So as Bill said, I'm going to talk about ADSB. He's already talked a little bit about what it's about. I'm going to explain a little bit about ADSB to the extent that I know about it. I got into this just because I read a QST article and about ADSB, and I thought, that looks like fun, so I think I'll give it a try. And so that's how I got into this, purely as I have an interest in aviation, and I thought it would be fun living in the DC area to see if I could track these aircraft. So that's how I got started in all this. And just to let you know also that as little as I know about this, it turns out that we have a club member. I found out about this in an email that I got from him last night. It's Ralph, AB4RS, Ralph Smith. It turns out that Ralph, I guess, gave a presentation back in 2010 on this because he's one of the guys who's actually helped to implement this system. So if you really want to understand something about ADSB really in depth, Ralph is the guy to talk to. He said he would be here tonight to keep me out of trouble, but I don't see him here yet. I'm going to talk about how I've set up my receiving station, and I have my station set up so that I'm actually contributing all of my data into a national network that's collected and used by some private services that provide aircraft location information, and for all I know, it's ending up in the hands of the air traffic control people. So anyway, ADSB, Bill indicated what the acronym stands for. It turns out the A is automatic, and what this means is that when a pilot fires up the airplane, turns on the avionics, the signal is sent automatically without any pilot intervention. So once the switch is flipped, there's no intervention required. It's dependent, and what that means is that the location information that's ultimately transmitted by the aircraft, that information is dependent on an outside source. So in the case of this, an aircraft that's gathering its location information gets it from the GPS system. It converts it into the ADSB signal that's transmitted, as I'll describe in just a minute. It's surveillance, so what that means is it provides close continuous operation observations of things like speed and altitude and heading, changes in direction, aircraft identification, aircraft type, and so forth. So all that information is transmitted in packets, and it's widely broadcast. So that means that stations within line of sight of the aircraft can receive the signals, and it's non-secure. And what that means is people like us can set up a receiving station, gather the data, interpret it, and learn something about it. And typically this information is sent in packets on a frequency of once every second. So these aircraft are transmitting this on a constant basis, which is at a much greater frequency than radar is, because a radar takes some 10, 11 seconds to spin around. This is happening once a second, so it dramatically apparently increases the resolution that's possible. So the way this works is that aircraft flying, first of all, need to, because of the D part of the ADSB, they're dependent on external location information. So they typically grab their location by monitoring GPS satellites. The GPS signals are taken and fed into the ADSB system and then transmitted in a broad range. It's broadcast so that stations anywhere can receive the signal. And then the ground stations transmit the information to air traffic control, and ultimately air traffic control can use this information to keep track of aircraft and provide guidance. The other thing that can happen is so what I've just described is a so-called ADSB out system, so it's a transmission out. Aircraft also have the ability to receive some aircraft have the ability to receive ADSB in, and when they can do that, they can receive information from aircraft in the vicinity. So it's a way for aircraft to help themselves understand the proximity of other aircraft around them. Of course, that's all dependent on the availability of the equipment in the airplanes. Now, this is a map that comes from a system called Flightaware. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Flightaware in just a minute, but all these little dots that you see on the map indicate locations where people have set up ground receiving stations. So you can see that in areas like North America and in Europe, there's a huge density of receiving stations, and all these stations are collecting the data and putting into the system, so there's a high degree of reliability associated with the signals that are received. And then you see in areas like Latin America, Africa, India, Australia, New Zealand, and so forth, the density of the stations is much lower, but still quite workable. And then the interesting aspect of this is you'll see that, of course, out over the ocean, except maybe on a few oil rigs, there's not very many of these receiving stations located. So some provisions have been made with the ADS-B system to actually gather information for aircraft that are out over the water like this. And the way that works is, again, the aircraft will gather its information from the GPS system, and then there's some low orbiting satellites like the Iridium satellites that are able to collect this information and then retransmit it to ground stations so that it's again collected and used by air traffic control and can be used for navigation and identification, location of aircraft where radar currently isn't available. So there's some real interesting advantages to this system. I'm not going to read this slide, but if you look around a little bit, the FAA lists a lot of benefits of the system. It increases the reliability of air traffic control, increases the resolution, provides coverage in areas where radar doesn't exist. So as this system advances, I think we're going to see the whole aim, of course, is keeping aircraft separate from each other and improving safety. Okay, so that's my quick overview of ADS-B, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them to the extent that I can, but of course the real technical expert, as I said, is Ralph. So building the ground station. So this is how I first found out about the possibility of being able to do this. And by the way, I'll post this presentation on the website, so if you're interested, you can get these links that I show on the slide here after this. But the link down at the bottom is a link to an article that appeared in QST a couple of years ago where they described this system, and this picture that I show here is the basics of a standalone system that you can set up with basically any computer. And the way it works is, of course, you need an antenna to start out. I'll show you my antenna in just a second, but it's like any antenna. The higher you can get it up in the sky and in clear line of sight to the horizon, the better. You need to carry the signal to your receiver wherever it may be. These receivers are cute little things. You can use these little SDR dongles. These are available readily from Amazon, for example. There's different models I'll show in just a second, but they typically run about 20 bucks. And these can plug then into the USB port of any computer that runs the software. And then there's two pieces of software that are helpful to have. The first one's essential. One of them is named Dump 1090. What this piece of software does is it takes the signal from the software-defined radio and the information, and it converts it to something that's useful. And then that can flow into what's called a virtual radar server, and that server typically does two things. One is it puts the information in a graphical format so that you actually have something nice to see on your computer. And then the other thing that you can do is you can feed the information out into the internet and contribute your data to be used more broadly. And that's the basic setup. There's tutorials available on the web. Particularly this group, RTL SDR, has this set up. And what I'm going to describe, again, is readily available at this website. So I'm going to go over this pretty fast, and if you're interested, you can go to the website, and it's all pretty self-explanatory. So first thing is you need an antenna, and the antennas that you need aren't at all complicated. People have their stations set up with vertical antennas with dipoles. This is a little J-pole right here, little collinear antenna, and then this is a coaxial collinear antenna. And again, in the QST article, they describe how to build one of these things. So this is just composed of a series of half-wavelength coaxial cables that are tied together with the alternating connections between the center feed and the shield. And it's really quite easy to build and quite inexpensive. And I keep it in this PVC pipe so that if I stick it outside and want to raise it up, it's protected and it works quite well. So you need the antenna, and this is just an example. I'll just leave it here. You can come up and have a look at it if you want a little bit later. But anyway, all of these work. And then, as I just described, you need the radio receiver, which is this SDR dongle. There are a number of different dongles that are available. The system that I'm using is made by Flightaware, and I'll have more information about that. But again, very inexpensive. And then the listening and decoding software, there are several versions available, all freeware. You just go to the website, download it, and install it. And there are tutorials that tell you what settings you need to set to accommodate whatever SDR dongle that you use. RTL 1090 is a common one. There's a version, Coco 1090, which is useful on the Mac if you want. And for Linux people, there's software for Linux users as well.
Thank you.
Okay, and then these are some examples of the graphical servers, the graphical radar display software, virtual radar server, plane spotter, ADBS scope. Again, they're all different flavors of software that do the same thing, all readily available as open source software on the net. And again, setting this up is all explained in the tutorial that I just described. So when I first started and set this up, that's what I did, is I set it up as a standalone system with a laptop computer, and it worked really well, but all I could see was is what I could see on my station. It was only immediate. There wasn't any connection to anything. I hadn't figured out yet how to share it with anyone. And then as time has gone on, I found out that there are ways to share your data through service providers that are anxious to have your data. In exchange for that, they give you access to their websites. And so the system that I'd like to describe, because I've used this, is a system called Flightaware. And if you're travelers, you may know about Flightaware. I started using it quite a long time ago because it's a nice piece of software. You can go on, you can put your flight information in, you can find out whether or not your flight is going to leave on time. You can look back to see where the arriving plane is coming from, so you can predict whether or not you're going to be late, if the arriving plane is going to be late, and so forth. And if you're really geeky, you can track and backtrack, and you can see the last month or so of where your airplane has been, which I think is kind of interesting. Odd, but interesting. So, and this software just has a lot of information. It talks about, it gives you information on departure times, change in runways. Again, if you're just interested in a little bit more about what your flight is, what has happened to it and where it's going, I find it kind of interesting. Anyway, Flightaware is dependent on people like us to get their data to know where these airplanes are. And so in exchange for providing them your information, you get access to their website. And in the case of Flightaware, the subscription they give you is worth about $90 a month. So for the cost of your station for 1 month, one month's of subscription cost is equivalent to the cost your equipment cost is equivalent to 1 month's subscription. So it's interesting and worth it to do it. So anyway, that's kind of how I got dragged into this. So Flightaware. When you go onto the Flightaware website, again, they make it really easy. The headline here is, do you want to build your own station? And getting started is fast and easy. And it's really the case that that's true. You can do that. So that's what I did, was I got my gear and I set it up. So instead of using this antenna, I was looking for something that was really quick and easy. So this was an antenna that they recommend. It's available on Amazon for about $35. It's a little short vertical antenna. That's the picture from the website, but this is a picture of my antenna that I have set up here. So I just put it, these green military surplus masts. I have it on about 8 or 9 of those, and I'm able to hoik it up to about the roof line of my house. So it's not a terribly complicated setup. Ron Payne will be very proud that I soldered the end connectors on my really good coax. And I ran that down into the house, and it then connects to the to my station. So this is my ground station right here. It is as the feed line comes into the house, as I just described, there's a little bandpass filter, and Rachel kindly just happened to have one here this evening, so this is the little bandpass filter. Costs about $20, again from Amazon, and it then rolls into this little Flightaware dongle. It is, again, another version of one of these little software-defined radios. It turns out that they have upgraded these dongles now for the same price. The blue one that I showed you earlier has this built into it, so if you buy one now, you really apparently don't need this filter. Anyway, that rolls into a little Raspberry Pi that I have here, power supply from the Raspberry Pi, and then I have this one hardwired into my network at home. So, you know, it picks an IP address from the off the local network. You can putty into it and change some settings if you need to. And but that's, again, it's all described on the Flightaware website, and it's very easy to set up. So then, once you have it set up, push the button and you start it, and it's off and running. And what happens is the software just handles all the connections to the Flightaware website. And what happens is on the home page, you go up here to My ADSB. You log in and go to My ADSB, and this is me, L. Brew here. And you can see I've been a member of this for 6 years ago, but it gives you some information about how long the station has been set up. And my station's been running since June 2017, and again, very stable. It's run for 207 days without any intervention on my part, so it's really stable in its operation. So, and then you enter some information about where you're at and so forth, and then it's off and running. And the thing, again, that's kind of fun about it is it gives you all kinds of data about what you see when you have the system set up. So I took these screenshots last week when I put the presentation together, and what you can see is that on a typical day, let's just pick this day, the 15th of March, I had 246,000 positions that I collected with the station via ADSB. It also collects stations through information called multilateration. So an airplane could be sending a signal that's not ADSB, and what happens is because there's so many stations, they're able to collect the time differentials between stations when the radio signal arrives, and by triangulating and all the wonderful mathematics behind it, they can also get some pretty accurate position reports. So my station was involved on this day with some 95,000 position reports that were worked out. And then there's some others here. So the total position reports that my station delivers on a typical day is getting close to 500,000 positions, which is quite a lot. And then aircraft reported, you know, they're sending these signals every second. So you take the grand total, and it turns out that, you know, on these days I collect and send information from about 3,500 aircraft a day. So that's a pretty good collection of data. And then they provide you the graphics and all that stuff, so it's kind of fun to watch. This is another graph I kind of like. So what it shows on each day, kind of a heat map here that shows the frequencies of signals that you collect versus time. So this is 12 a.m. Let's just pick the 12th of March here. So you can see midnight, and then through the wee hours of the morning, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. It's pretty quiet out there, and then things ramp up during the day. And so, you know, there's just sort of this daily cycle where quiets down at night, and then you see the action during the day. And then this is another interesting graph. This is a coverage graph, and you know, because it knows where the locations of the airplanes are, again, you can get a heat map that shows the direction that you receive the best. And it turns out, as you can see, my station is pretty good from about north-northwest to south-southeast, with I can still receive to the west, but not so good. The reason for that is that my house, my roof line is right to the west of my antenna, so I got to get it up a little bit higher, you know, to get a little bit more balance in my signal. So anyway, that's useful information for your station setup. And then again, you can see here it shows the positions reported by distance. So not surprisingly, 110,000 are shown here as being less than 50 miles. and then 50 to 100, 150, and so forth. So you can see that the closer they are, the more frequent are the contacts. Another thing that's interesting is they rank your stations. So there's about 50,000 stations out there, and when I took this last Saturday, I was 134. So I'm doing pretty good relative to the whole world out there. Got to get to one. Got to raise that antenna. So anyway, a little spirited competition going on out there. Okay, so then this is the other thing that I really like. This is the fun bit for me. So there's a new link they put on the website. When you click it, you get taken to this screen here. So this is a screenshot of, so to speak, the radar output that I can see from my station. And so what you see here is you see all these aircraft are aircraft that are received by my station and reported. And the way this works is the altitude of the aircraft is color-coded. So the aircraft that are flying over, those guys that are 38, 40,000 feet are the purple ones. And then in a second, I'll have a better shot. You can see the guys that are on approach to landing or on departure, and you can watch their color change as they either descend or they climb. So it's kind of fun to watch them. And then each of these over here, this list over here, you can click on and it'll highlight the aircraft so you can see where it is and see where they're from and where they're going. The other thing that you can do is you can click on an aircraft and you can see where it is and where it's from. So in this case, I clicked on this one. This looked interesting. It was a flight that was coming down this way and ultimately making going to make the turn and land at Dulles. So when I clicked on it, you'll see this little window up here pops up, and it says it's BAW 293. So this is the British Airways flight coming in from Heathrow at about 10 o'clock in the evening. And then what you can do, if you want, you can click on this little link up here, and it takes you to the Flightaware page, which gives you all this information about the aircraft. So British Airways 293 from London, whenever it left, where it flew, when it was going to land, how much time was left, its cruising altitude, its cruising speeds, all kinds of data and information about the aircraft. So again, if you're into this kind of stuff, you can find out just about anything that you want. Another one that I thought was really interesting, again, I was just messing around on Saturday, and I saw this heavy right here, and I thought, I wonder who he is, so I clicked on it, and it turns out it was this guy right here. So that's seen here, Atlas Air 8992. He was flying from somewhere near Chicago, where was it, O'Hare, to an airfield here in New Jersey. So anyway, it's just kind of fun stuff. Okay, so last thing before I run out of time here is I captured a little video here. So before I start it, a couple things I want you to notice here. So this right here is where Reagan Airport is, and you can see there's an approach pattern here, and you can see here, and you can see the aircraft are all lined up here one after the other. And oh, sorry, this is the airport right here. So there's a bunch of aircraft on the ground here, but you can watch these guys going along here. And then Dulles is over here, and you can see them coming in and swinging around. And then the other thing that I think is kind of cool is the departure route. So when the planes leave Reagan, they head out up the river, and they either hang a left or hang a right and go on their way. So this is about 4 minutes worth of time that I captured that I mushed down to 2 minutes. Have a watch here. And then as they're going, you can click on them and you can see who they are and where they're going. So there's a little window up here.
How cool is this?
And so, you know, again, here's some departures coming out of Reagan. So here's a guy here leaving, another guy here leaving. You can see these guys approaching the airport to land.
Does it show where the luggage is going?
I don't think they sorted that one yet.
If the good guys can see this, can't the bad guys see this also?
Well, you know, as you read about this and read about the security, you know, that's a question. Some of these are time delayed as well, so there's a couple of minutes of time delay that's involved in this. But and here's our expert. So just so you know, this is where my station is located right here. So I'm receiving all these aircraft right here. So anyway, this is what you can do with the station. Okay. So let's see, what do we got next here? In addition to Flightaware that I've just described, there are a couple of other entities that you can work with. Bill showed me you had Flight Radar 24. You can contribute to Flight Radar 24, and they give you their grand subscription scheme for free if you set up one of these stations. And then open air traffic, Open Sky is another one that you can share your data with. So these are readily available, and for sure, Flightaware again has a tutorial if you want to use them to set all this stuff up. So, and then this is kind of a cool picture. I thought this was neat. This was from the Flightaware website, and it just gives you a sense for the airplanes, and you can see where they go, and it's really interesting, the tracks east and west across the Atlantic and into Asia from North America. Again, I'll post this deck. I just grabbed some general references on ADSB if you want to know more about it, how to set up your own station. So there's that article in QST that I mentioned. There's a couple of interesting YouTubes out there as well, and then for the crowdsourcing, Flightaware, Flight Radar, I've left links there. And that's it. So that's the story. Thanks very much.